Okay, we're going to have a look at how to process raw files when bringing them into Photoshop. Now here's a folder on the desktop with a number of image files in it that have been taken on a Nikon D5100, and this is just the folder of everything that's been taken. The Nikon has been set on to take a raw file with basically a low resolution JPEG. Now it's always good to shoot in RAW, mainly because that gives you a lot more scope to adjust your image when you're bringing into Photoshop what they call sort of post-production basically. And it's a lot better to process a raw file as you bring it in with the plugin than it is to just shoot in JPEGs and then adjust them, mainly because you maintain the image quality. So raw files are basically just the raw data that hasn't been changed or compressed, or the colors changed as it would happen with a JPEG, and basically it's as it is, so it gives you a lot more scope to edit. Now we're going to bring in an image that we've taken, and you'll see it'll have a file extension of NEF, N-E-F, and that is Nikon's version of RAW. Sometimes different camera manufacturers may have their own versions of RAW, so there's different types of versions of RAW, but the plugin for Photoshop tends to sort of open them all as long as you keep them up to date. If you do encounter having any problems with compatibility and processing your RAW file when opening it up into Photoshop because the plugin's not compatible or up to date, you can download Adobe's Digital Negative Converter. All you need to do is just search Adobe's site for Adobe DNG and you'll find the page. It tells you all the camera formats it opens, all the different raw files from all those different types of cameras, and down at the bottom you download it. Now how it works is once you've downloaded it, you can get it for both Mac and PC, it's mostly about batching things from a folder. So ideally you would have all your images in a folder, you would select that, select a destination if that's going to be different. You might want to change the file extension or how the file extension is configured in the capitals or lowercase, and then you would convert those files, and this would mean you get more of a generic raw file that can be easily opened. So if I just bring that in and open it up in Photoshop, what it will do, it will open up the raw panel. Now that's floating on top of the Photoshop program, and you process it here with the options that are available, and then you just open the image and it'll take it on and open it in Photoshop. Now up at the top you've got a number of tools right across the top. Now what you can do is click on this one to toggle and make it full screen. Now the tools along the top are some of the tools that you also have in Photoshop, so it's your choice if you want to use them or not. You have the zoom tool where you can zoom into your image. Then we've got the hand tool which you can move your image around. And again, it just basically works as it would do in Photoshop. The next one is the white balance eyedropper, and that's really good for selecting sort of a neutral white balance. Ideally, when people take photographs, say for example you take some photographs that are still life, and one of the photographs you can put a grey card in there, just a piece of card that's grey, then you would get the eyedropper and click it on the grey, and that's the color balance, and that sort of will neutralize the rest of your image, so that's quite good for that. Next one along is the color sampler. Then we got the target adjustment, and that will target areas on your image to adjust. You can also crop your image as you would do in Photoshop. You can also straighten your image, again if you want to do that, or you can do it in Photoshop. It has retouching tools, so it has spot removal, and also it has red eye. These again are available in Photoshop itself. Then we have an adjustment brush again. These things you can do in Photoshop, and also you can put gradients on there. This one here is the preferences, and you can change some preferences on there if you wish, and we'll turn that off. And then the final ones here are basically to turn your image around. Again, something you could do in Photoshop. Now on the panel on the right, it's got a histogram right up at the top, and it will tell you what f-stop you've taken your image with. Also, it will tell you what the shutter speed was, light sensitivity in the ISO, in this case it was 180, and then it has the lens that was used and what that lens was set at. So basically I used an 18 to 55 and the millimeter was 20 millimeters, so it tells you that information. Now there are a number of buttons underneath there. First one is just the basic, and on the basic you just do basic adjustment. So it has a white balance set as shot, so that's how it's been taken. Now you can use auto and it'll rearrange auto. If that's not to your satisfaction, you can change it to any one of the conditions. So if it's been a bit of a cloudy day, you could take it on a cloudy day and it could adjust that. If you're taking it with fluorescent lighting, you can put the fluorescent lighting and hopefully it will adjust that. Now mainly if they're not right, you can try auto, and again if that doesn't do it the way you want it to be, you can change the temperature. Now the color temperature you can move to the left or the right and it warms it up or cools it down, so you can use the color temperature. If your image has a tint, again this is where you would remove the tint as it goes through the spectrum, taking its left or the right. Exposure is quite handy because the exposure will, as if you're taking it on the camera, it will sort of, it's a bit overexposed, you can take it down, or if it's underexposed you can take it up, so you can change that. You can change the contrast, which can go up and down, and you can select that. Also you can do the highlights. Now the highlights will just take the highlights of the image. Shadows will just adjust the shadows on your image, and then if you have any whites they can be adjusted as well, and also moving down to the blacks in your image, similar to the shadow detail. You can move clarity and make your picture a little bit more clear with definition. Then we have the vibrance, which can be changed, and this will make either strip your image down or you can make it more vibrant. And then again saturation, which you can increase the saturation of your image or decrease it as you wish. Moving on from there, you have some of the change in the contrasts. So basically you have a graph and you can move the contrast on here and take it up and down, so you can move the actual slider as you move these, if you wish again to just have a different way of adjusting your image and move those around. The next one is sharpening, so you can sharpen. Always be aware that if you sharpen too much you may lose a bit of detail. It's always probably a good idea to zoom in on something, take it in, maybe get it on 100%, and then that will give you more idea of how you're sharpening your image. So you can sharpen up your image and move the adjustments. Noise basically is any noise that's on there, any sort of where it's been taken maybe with a high ISO, and you might want to start to correct that. You can take down the noise that's in the color or the noise that's in the detail, and that tries to smoothen those out for you. Moving along is basically changing the image and its color, which I'll just take back down. Now what you can do here is you can select colors. So I've got the red in the logo there on the sign, and if I take the red up it will make it more vibrant. And obviously if I take the other adjustments down, you can strip out all the other colors you take out, and it will just leave basically the red adjustments. And the same thing happens here. You can take that down and you can do selective color or just highlight the different parts of the image that has colour, and it will bring it in and bring it out if you wanted to do something creative or graphic with it. I'll just take these up, put them in the centres before we move on. Again, these are for split toning, so you have highlights and shadows, so you can change those things around. So basically, this will just change the hue and saturation in the highlights, and then also you can change it in the shadow detail. So it basically changes the two parts of the image. Usually they're the problems that you have. Sometimes you just shadows and that has a knock-on effect on highlights and vice versa. Here you can split it and you can have how you're balancing it out as well between the two. Also, you can change the lens. It has different types of presets where you can change it for different types of lenses. For different manufacturers, so it change it to those type of lenses if you're quite an expert on lenses, and that will change how you're working. You can distort it, you can have a vignetting, which is sort of darkening around the edges, and change certainly the colours to match lenses. Manual might be quite useful because in the manual you can change distortion and change the image around. Effects, you can give your image the feeling of grain. So if you take an image you want quite a grainy feeling, sometimes you want to get away from that, so you can adjust those. Moving on, you can calibrate. There's some calibrating standards that you can have on here, which brings in some of the calibration standard presets. Final one is if you have presets. Usually if you're working on images, you might have a number of different presets you would like to bring in. Now, once you're happy with an image and you played around it and adjusted it, you would then just click on open, and your image would then appear in Photoshop.